Good afternoon, everyone. This is John McCain with South Carolina DHEC Dam Safety Program. And today, I hope everyone is not having any trouble viewing our presentation, but we will be recording it, and so it will be made available after the fact on our website. So if you do have technical problems, just know that you can watch this after the fact. A couple things I was asked to mention before we jump into the presentation is there will be a question and answer session after we're complete. We've gone through all the slides today, so if you want to, you can enter your questions in the Q&A box on Microsoft Teams. You can go ahead and enter those questions at any time, but we're not going to get around to answering them until the end of the presentation. And also, I was informed there's about a 20-second delay between when I speak and when you hear or see what's being presented. So from the time you enter your question, there will be some delay before we can see it and get a response. With that, appreciate everyone being able to join us today. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. And again, my name is John McCain, and I manage the dam safety section here at DHEC in the Bureau of Water. My contact information is there. So if you do have anything you want to ask, after this, after today, you can contact me, preferably by email, but, my phone, you can also call by phone. Have no problem with that. Just, you can see this little picture of here is at the largest dam in the Western Hemisphere. And I had the opportunity to go to Brazil in 2010 and see that facility. So that's an old picture. I have a lot more gray and a lot less hair. And what I do have is more gray. But I just think it was a cool opportunity to see such a massive dam. So today's agenda, you're here to learn about the High Hazard Potential Dams grant program. And so we'll start with some background information on that grant program and talk about the available funds for this year. Then we'll talk about what makes a dam eligible for this grant program. And then a separate discussion is who is eligible to apply, or what makes someone an eligible applicant for the grant. And then, in addition to those eligibility items, then what are the activities that would be eligible should someone receive a grant? So a lot of talk about eligibilities. Then we'll talk about the state and federal requirements that apply to a grant award. Then we'll go into the grant application process and our estimated timeline. Then we'll talk a bit about how DHEC is going to review the applications and then select from among those applications which projects are awarded grant funds. And then we'll have our question and answer session at the end. So just for some background on this grant opportunity, it's called the National High Hazard Potential Dams, or HHPD, Rehabilitation Grant Program. And it was actually created in December of 2016 when Congress passed the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. So that was calendar year 2016 when the law was passed that created this grant program or authorized it, which on the federal calendar is federal fiscal year 20. That was in federal fiscal year 2017. However, it was 2 years before any money was actually appropriated to a grant program. So even though there was the authority to issue these grants, there was no money. No money had been appropriated. So that happened for the first time in federal fiscal year 2019, when $10 million was appropriated for the entire nation. So $10 million for the thousands and thousands of high hazard dams nationwide, is not a lot of money. And so subsequent years, the following fiscal year, another $10 million was appropriated. And then in federal fiscal year 21, a slight increase to $11,640,000 has been appropriated. And that's this grant opportunity that you all are here to learn about. And again, that's $11,640,000 for all the entire United States and the territories. Any state or territory that has a dam safety program that's how that's the pot of money we all are trying to get a piece of. So, and just for kind of perspective, the act itself authorized Congress to appropriate up to $60 million in each fiscal year, starting with the current one through 2026. So even though it's not being appropriated anywhere near its what it could be, there is the ability for it to be increased. And so there's always that possibility. But it's only authorized through fiscal year 2026. After that, Congress would have to reauthorize the grant program. So at the state level, we at DHEC administer the state high hazard potential dams rehabilitation grant for owners of South Carolina dams. In that first year, which was federal fiscal year 2019, South Carolina DHEC decided to utilize the grant to perform risk analysis on state and local government-owned dams. And so that grant was $301,000 from FEMA, and it does require a match of non-federal dollars. So in fiscal year 19, we use state funds to come up with that match of $162,000. And that activity is still ongoing. Those studies, the risk analysis is still ongoing. In the second year of the program, just last year, that's our first year of making sub awards. So once DHEC gets an award from FEMA, we turn around and make sub awards to South Carolina dam owners. And so that notice of funding opportunity went out last October, and we were able to make a sub award of $585,000 of federal dollars to a dam, and that dam owner was responsible for the $315,000 matching funds. So moving on. So regarding the available funds for this fiscal year, this grant cycle, first off, it's too early to know. I can't say how much South Carolina will have to make sub awards with. I do have some, at least some basis for kind of what, at a minimum, what we will have. Of that $11,640,000. The way the funding formula works is that 1/3 of that money is divided evenly among all the state applicants. So not all the states, but all the state applicants. And we've heard that there were 15 applications submitted to FEMA. And whether or not that's, whether or not all those applications will be accepted and will receive funds, I don't know, but assuming that all 15 are accepted, 1/3 of $11,640,000 is $3,880,000. divided by 15 gives us $258,000. So that's our minimum, we hope. So starting there, and then the remaining 2/3 of that 11 million is divided among the states based on the application's share of eligible dams. So in each application, a state has to list the dams in that state that are eligible for the grant. So we had 9 eligible dams in our application, and so FEMA will then determine from all the applications the total number of eligible dams, and then our share will be whatever 9 divided by that total number of dams, whatever that percentage of the 7,760,000 happens to be, will also be part of our grant award. So it's just too early to say for sure, but it's likely we will have some money. We're not. I can't. It's going to probably be another 6-figure type of grant award, but it's again, I don't want to speculate too much. And I will talk more about the dam, the 9 eligible dams, and how that does not necessarily. That list is not final. That list is not an exclusive list there, and I will go into that with more detail. But just to talk about what makes a dam eligible, this all comes from the law that authorized the grant program to begin with. So regardless of ownership, so we're not talking ownership at this point has no bearing on whether a dam is eligible. So whether it's privately owned, publicly owned, or something else entirely, does not affect whether the dam itself is an eligible dam. But the first requirement is that the dam has to meet the federal definition of dam, which is found in the U.S. Code of Laws. And it's very similar to the South Carolina definition of dam. It's any artificial barrier that has the ability to impound water, wastewater, or any liquid-borne material for the purpose of storage or control of water. That is either one or the other, 25 feet more in height, which is the same as in South Carolina, or has an impounding capacity for maximum storage elevation of 50 acre-feet or more, which is also the same as South Carolina. However, South Carolina has an additional provision that a dam can be regulated if the dam's failure has the potential to cause loss of life. The federal definition does not have such a provision. Therefore, any dam that can't meet the 25 feet in height or 50 acre-feet or more in storage does not count, does not meet the federal definition of a dam, and therefore would not be eligible. Additional eligibility requirements: it must be a non-federal dam, so it can't be owned by the federal government. The dam must be located in a state with a dam safety program, which South Carolina happens to have, so that one is met. The dam is classified as high hazard potential, which is kind of obvious since it's called the High Hazard Potential Dams Rehabilitation Grant. The dam must have an emergency action plan that is approved by the state dam safety agency, and the dam fails to meet minimum state dam safety standards and poses an unacceptable risk to the public. And the dam is not a licensed hydroelectric dam. The dam was not built under the authority of the Secretary of Agriculture. And the dam's deficiencies are not solely the result of a lack of or deferred maintenance. If the dam's deficiencies are solely due to neglect and not performing maintenance, then the dam is not eligible. That doesn't mean that a dam that may have these issues, as long as there is some other deficiency that is not due to this lack of maintenance, the dam can be eligible. But if the sole deficiency is the result of a lack of maintenance, then it's not going to be eligible. And then the last requirement is new for this fiscal year, or the last eligibility requirement. FEMA has decided that we have to look at both the likelihood of failure and the consequences of failure in determining which dams are eligible. And so this chart is what FEMA has said we need to plot all of our dams on this chart, where the likelihood of failure of each dam and the consequences of failure of each dam determines which box in this grid that a dam falls into. And only the dams that fall into the red boxes are eligible for the grant. And so I think the next slide I'll show a little bit more. So the likelihood of failure, FEMA told us that that will correspond to the DHEC inspection rating. So a very high likelihood of failure would be a dam that is given an unsatisfactory inspection rating by DHEC. And similarly, a dam with a low likelihood of failure would be a dam given a satisfactory inspection rating. And then the consequences, which is called population at risk, that's the total number of lives that are potentially at risk from failure of the dam. And so that ranges from a low consequences of 1 to 10 lives up to a very high of 1,000, over 1,000 lives lost. So that comes from well, currently, based on these criteria, we determined there were 9 dams eligible based on both the DHEC inspection condition and the population at risk from our DSSY's Lite software that we use to model dam breaches. And these dams are, you can see where they fall in the red boxes here, and these are the national inventory of dams ID numbers for the 9 dams that we determined were eligible. But again, like I said earlier, this does not mean other dams cannot prove their eligibility. We just need documentation of deficiencies that say that a DHEC inspection alone does not reveal. So just because a dam may have a fair inspection rating and it impacts 11 to 100 lives and plots in this green box, if some documentation can be provided to show, oh, there's actually a significant deficiency that makes the dam, that makes likelihood of failure greater, that can be used to justify moving it, maybe to the red box. And for example, we have a dam in our inventory, and I believe it is one of these 9 that that did get a fair inspection rating, but an engineer has determined the dam is vulnerable to an earthquake or a seismic event. So it does not have the ability to withstand an earthquake, and therefore that knowing that and having it documented by an engineer means it is eligible based off of that knowledge and that information on the dam's condition. So that was talking about what makes a dam eligible. Now I'll talk about what makes an applicant eligible, who can actually submit an application for consideration. So it's really two things make an applicant eligible. The applicant must either be a non-federal government entity, which is, for example, a state agency or a county government or a municipal government, a tribal government, a special purpose district. These are all examples, but not to say it's a complete list. And then a nonprofit organization can also apply. And FEMA has defined this or further defined this to mean an eligible nonprofit organization is described under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code and exempt from tax under Section 501a of the Revenue Code. So essentially, a 501c3 nonprofit is eligible. But if a lot of you are probably saying, so as a private dam owner, and as an individual, what am I to do? Well, an individual, cannot apply directly. So that is correct. And if that's, but there is, as long as the dam is eligible, an individual or private citizen can find a project sponsor who would be eligible to apply on their behalf. So as an individual or a private citizen, if you can find any of those, a county or a municipal government or a nonprofit organization or a special, any of these eligible applicants can apply on your behalf, and that application would be accepted. However, as the applicant, the project sponsor is assuming responsibility for the project. That includes being responsible for complying with grant requirements, federal laws and regulations, receiving and spending the grant money or the grant funds, and more. So there's a lot of responsibility a project sponsor is taking on as being a project, as sponsoring your project. So that will, just to be completely candid, that does make finding project sponsors challenging. So now that we've talked about what makes a dam eligible and who can apply, who is eligible to apply, we're going to talk about what activities are eligible to be funded. So as you all know, it's called the Rehabilitation Grant Program. And FEMA's defined rehabilitation to include the repair, replacement, reconstruction, and even removal of a dam. All are considered rehabilitation activities. However, even though, so what activities can be funded under this particular grant? So this cycle, this year, it's limited to planning activities, preliminary engineering activities, and final design activities with an asterisk. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But the big red box, was intended to draw your attentions because I want to be absolutely, everyone needs to understand that construction activities are not allowable under this year's grant. You can't just go straight to construction. Construction being repair, replacement, reconstruction, or removal. You can't go straight to those activities. It requires, the first year or this year of the grant is for planning and engineering to advance your project to that construction phase in a later grant year. And regarding the final design asterisk there, that's also a big, even final design is a challenge at this point, unless for your dam you have already completed a risk analysis that has identified all the dam deficiencies and completed an evaluation of all the alternative remediation actions. So essentially, for FEMA to approve that a final design, that's essentially saying this is our final solution. We know this will correct the big deficiency, the major deficiency, and so we're not, we want to go forward with this final plan. And that's going to be tough to justify to FEMA unless a lot of preliminary engineering and evaluation of all the potential solutions have been considered, and the best solution the best solution that reduces the risk posed by the dam in the most cost-effective way possible. It has been identified. So again, it's going to be tough to even to justify a final design project in this grant year. Regarding these eligible or allowable activities, the time to perform these activities is essentially about 2 years. So all the activities would need to be completed by September. I'm sorry, 3 years of 2024. However, that September of 2024 can be extended. There is the provision for that date to be extended, but that does require FEMA review and approval. And also, it won't be, it'll be less than 3 years because we're not going to be issuing or awarding grants within a month or two here. It's going to be more like the spring of next year. So just keep that in mind, that it won't be a full 3 years. And I will talk about the timeline later to give everyone a better idea. But that is the end date for the activities to be completed, September of 2024. So regarding what some of these eligible activities, so for planning, some examples of planning activities that would be allowable are development of evacuation plans, flood management plans, emergency action plans, etc. These are all plans that help to reduce the risk from a dam failure. Studies and investigations that are designed to determine and quantify the risks associated with different dam failure modes. Environmental studies for NEPA compliance, and NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Act, and everyone should be aware that whenever federal dollars are utilized to do any kind of construction or any kind of anything with potential for disturbance, the National Environmental Protection Act requires these environmental studies that will determine the level of impact, how the environment, endangered species, also historical areas or with historical value, how these will be impacted by the activity. So the studies to determine the level of impact is eligible for the grant. Public education and awareness activities regarding the flood risks associated with the dam. And then moving next to the preliminary engineering activities that are allowable, the dam risk and consequence assessments that would go into quantifying the risk posed by the dam and quantifying the consequences of dam failure to a more accurate or a more thorough degree than DHEC has done so far. Any kind of surveying and mapping activities that are required, geotechnical investigations to understand how the dam is constructed, how the if it was it may have been constructed before regulations existed, so understanding the types of soils and materials used in constructing the dam, and the foundation soils of the dam can need to be investigated. The hydrologic and dam breach inundation modeling that may need to be conducted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the alternatives analysis. So all the different possible options to rehabilitate the dam need to be analyzed with the associated costs of each and the how much risk reduction those rehabilitation methods would achieve. So to evaluate all those alternatives so that the best one, the most cost-effective rehabilitation method is selected. And then final design engineering, if, like I said, it's going to be a difficult thing to justify a final design engineering grant or project, but some of the activities that are allowable are the development of engineering plans and drawings for a chosen rehabilitation method, and then development of the technical and material specifications that say a contractor would need to follow in performing the work, in doing the construction. So the technical and material specs that an engineer develops for a contractor. So, but again, as I mentioned, unless the dam has already been well studied and all deficiencies are known and a risk analysis has been completed, a grant application for final engineering design is likely to be denied because, again, you can't just jump straight to that final solution, that final saying, hey, this is our chosen option for rehabilitation. You can't, it has to be justified. It has, the dam has to be fully studied and all the deficiencies known even before you can try to propose any kind of construction or even, like I said, final design project. So at this time, we recommend it's better to apply for the planning and preliminary engineering now and reserve that final design engineering for a future grant cycle. So again, I'm still going into this whole final design engineering with, I just want everyone to understand what is required for a project like that to be approved. The dam must be completely investigated, which includes the geotechnical, hydrologic, hydraulic, and structural aspects of the dam, so that all deficiencies and potential failure modes are known. Essentially, the consequences and the consequences of dam failure must be clearly understood. This may require dam breach modeling beyond what DHEC has done for your dam. You may know that DHEC does dam breach modeling, but we do it. We don't do it to the extent that a consulting engineer would need to do. So there are likely it would require additional dam breach modeling for a final design project to be approved. Then all the practical alternatives to rehabilitate the dam must be evaluated, and the cost estimates for each alternative need to be established. And then the alternatives analysis should include removing downstream populations or infrastructure instead of rehabilitating the dam. So essentially, as an additional option, to rehabilitating the dam, what we're saying is as an alternative, look at maybe relocating homes or relocating infrastructure. If that's a cheaper solution that achieves the same amount of risk reduction, it needs to be looked at and considered. And it may be that may be a project that gets funded as opposed to an expensive repair or rehabilitation of a dam. So kind of going into more into this alternatives analysis, what we would look or expect to see. This is from a FEMA guidance document. So this was prepared by FEMA. And so you can see this same kind of grid of the likelihood of failure on the left, and then the consequences of failure on the bottom there. And the circles, the circles here at the top, kind of in the top right, are your starting points for the dams. D1, D2, D3 are all dams that have, say in this example, have applied for a grant, and from the starting point here in the top right, you see there are these arrows that point to D1 P1 and D2 P2 and D2P1. So these represent, so for instance, D2P1 and D2P2 are two potential rehabilitation projects. So Dam 2 Project 1 and Dam 2, that should say Project P2, Project 2, are two potential rehabilitation projects for Dam 2. So what you're seeing is the dotted lines are showing how, say a $10 million project here for D2P1 and a $15 million project for D2P2 are reducing that likelihood of failure, and in the case of D2P2, reducing the consequences of failure as well. So essentially, the cost estimate helps us know, so like how much risk reduction can be achieved for a certain amount of dollars. And so that's kind of what this graph is showing, the amount of risk reduction you can get for a particular project. And so regarding that likelihood of failure, what we would expect, what we would be looking for is some kind of annual probability of failure. And this is kind of showing, for a remote likelihood of failure would be something like a failure that has a probability of 1 in 1 million chance in any given year. Whereas a very high likelihood of failure would be something that has at least a 1 in 1,000 chance, if not greater. And similar, so we basically are putting buckets of dams where the likelihood of failure is within within these ranges of probability. And these are going to be, we're not saying an exact number. It's within a range, because putting an exact number is almost is very difficult. But putting the probability of failure within a range is more doable. And again, this is something that an engineer, a consulting engineer, will have to assist with. It's not something that the dam owner can do on his or her own. And then when we look at consequence of failure, again, we're looking at loss of life, which ranges from loss of life of 0 up to where extremely high loss of life would be greater than 1,000 lives lost. So these are the consequences, the kind of the buckets that we use for when we talk about consequence of failure. And again, it's not, we're not saying an exact number. We're putting it within a range because that's easier to do, and it's just more. It serves our purpose, and it's just it's more practical. So again, I just want to show in this example, again, when I'm talking about D2 in the blue. Say for example, the D2 Project 1, that was a $10 million project. Let's assume that represents spillway upgrades that give the dam greater spillway capacity. Therefore, it's less likely to be overtopped in a major storm event. So by giving it greater spillway capacity, we're not, the dam is still, all the homes are still downstream, everything downstream remains. So the consequences of failure is not changing. However, because we've added spillway capacity, the dam, maybe the dam was at risk of overtopping before, and now it's no longer at risk of overtopping. So we have seriously reduced the likelihood of failure by that project, that $10 million project. For example, project 2 for $15 million may be reducing the height of the dam. So not only by reducing the height of the dam, we're reducing the amount of storage of water storage behind the dam. We're reducing the potential if the dam were to fail, how much water and how high a column of water would be released. By reducing the height of the dam, we may be even lowering the dam from lowering the hazard class. It may not be a high hazard dam after that reduction or after that height reduction. So not only are we reducing the likelihood of failure, we are reducing the consequences of failure. So for a $15 million project, we can achieve both reduction in likelihood of failure and consequences. But as I said, one alternative that should always be considered is actually that relocation of the vulnerable population. So what if for $5 million, simply by relocating 15 homes downstream, we can obviously we're not touching the dam, so the likelihood of failure of the dam remains unchanged, but the consequences of failure go from very high to low for $5 million. So in this situation, that $5 million project may be that may be the project that we want to pursue, that gets approved and goes forward. So this is kind of what, just to give everyone an idea of when we say an alternatives analysis, what we're going to be expecting, how we can justify your project to FEMA. And all this may sound like a lot of effort and work, and it is. But this is what the grant can help pay for, the planning and engineering that go into essentially reaching this point. And so, as I mentioned, there are non-structural activities that are allowed, include purchasing those downstream properties for the purpose of removing or relocating at-risk populations or infrastructure. But again, it must be supported by an alternatives analysis that shows that alternative represents the most effective risk reduction. Some construction activities that are authorized under this law but are not allowed under this year's grant include, again, structural repair or rehabilitation of a dam, which would be construction, dam removal. Again, a construction activity, construction monitoring, and installation of early warning systems associated with the eligible dam project. So those are authorized under the law, but for this year, those are not projects that will be approved. And then for activities that are not even allowable under the law, that would never be allowed under this grant program, would be rehabilitating a federal dam, rehabilitating a breached dam, and the reason for that is a breached dam is essentially the lowest risk situation. So anytime you restore a dam's ability to impound water, which would be rehabilitating a breached dam, you are increasing the risk. So you cannot restore a breached dam, because that is, in any way you look at it, you're adding to the risk by restoring that dam's ability to impound water. Any type of routine maintenance or operation, any of those activities are not going to be eligible under this program. To modify a dam to produce hydroelectric power is not eligible. Any attempt to increase the water supply storage capacity is not eligible, again, because that increases risk. The more water you impound or the more water you store only increases risk. I mean, essentially, that is saying the same thing as rehabilitating a breached dam. And then making any other modification that does not also improve the safety of the dam. So some of the state and federal requirements that come along with receiving a grant, there's a long list of these laws, regulations, executive orders, and the programmatic requirements that FEMA has imposed that have to be met either before, during, or after, or throughout all three of a grant-funded project. And the project sponsor, again, it would be responsible for compliance with all these requirements, even if the project sponsor is not the dam owner. It's ultimately the sponsor who is applying and who would therefore be responsible. I'm just going to go through some of these federal requirements just to give you an idea of how, there's an extensive list. The environmental and historic preservation requirements, non-discrimination in the workplace, procurement of engineers, of contractors, of supplies and materials, cost principles, audit requirements, and administrative requirements, debarment and suspension rules, drug-free workplace requirement, fair wages and labor standards, which generally apply to construction workers, the Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act, the Single Audit Act, Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Act, which if purchasing property is involved, would come into play. And then the programmatic requirements, which are created by FEMA in its administration of this program. One of the big ones that everyone needs to be aware of is that if you go through and complete a construction project, there must be an agreement in place to provide maintenance and operation for the life of the rehabilitated dam. Again, it would not be applicable if you're only doing planning and engineering, but if you were to do a construction project, for the life of that project, maintenance and operations must be performed, or else, if the dam is not maintained, then the funds would have to be paid back. So again, if your project were to reach the construction phase, that is a pretty big commitment. And again, it would be the project sponsor, where, if we're talking a privately owned dam, the project sponsor would be responsible for ensuring that maintenance and operation is conducted for the life of the real rehabilitated dam. There's a requirement for a local hazard mitigation plan that addresses all dam risk. And that's a county level plan. Each county in South Carolina has a hazard mitigation plan. And so this requirement means that the county's hazard mitigation plan needs to be updated to include a section that talks about high hazard dams and the risks posed by those high hazard dams. And if that is not in place at the time of application, your application must include a request for a 12-month extension to have that plan created. And so no county in South Carolina currently has such a plan. So every application will need to include this request for a 12-month extension to implement such a plan. And so that means every applicant will need to coordinate with their county emergency management office to include that extension request letter. So it essentially needs to be in the form of a letter from the county to FEMA requesting that extension. And then another requirement is a floodplain management plan that addresses flooding risks in the downstream area protected by the dam. And I don't, and no dam, to my knowledge, has such a plan that fully complies. So again, this is something that would have to be developed within 12 months of an award, developed and then but implemented only if a construction project is completed. So a plan would have to be developed for any grant award, but only implemented if a construction project is funded. And then here at DHEC at the state level, we have the requirement. We've implemented the requirement that this grant program is a reimbursement only program. So we don't advance funds for anything. The applicant or the project sponsor must fund the activity. So all the work or all the the work has to be performed and paid for before we will reimburse a dam owner. Now, I'm not saying all of the work. Essentially, it would be a monthly reimbursement. So a dam owner or sponsor, would be invoiced monthly, say by their engineer, would pay that invoice, and then submit the paid invoice and documentation to DHEC for reimbursement. So that's how that program, that's how it will work. And then in addition to federal procurement requirements, the state procurement code would also apply. So that's a state level requirement that state procurement laws are followed. So how do you apply? What's the process to apply? So to basically for a complete application, that will include a completed application form that DHEC has created. So basically a form that gives us the basic information about the applicant, the project, the budget, or the proposed budget. Just a short 2-page form, and then attached to that would be supplemental documentation that would include an eligibility narrative, so discussion of why the dam is eligible, why the applicant is eligible, etc. A project narrative that discusses what the project proposes to do. A plan to advance the project to final design and construction. So as we were saying earlier, if the project at this phase is planning and preliminary engineering, what is the dam owner's plan for the next phase, which may be the final engineering, and the phase after that, which may be the actual construction. So we want to know that the grant we're funding, for this planning or the preliminary engineering, is not just going to go to that, and then progress would stop. We want to know that if we fund this project, there's a plan for the next phase and the next phase, so that we reach or we achieve that rehabilitation. So how the project will be advanced needs to be addressed. Your project milestones need to be provided, and whether what those big goals are, and what the timeline is to achieve those, and how the project will be completed within that time frame that FEMA has given, which means ending no later than September of 2024. A detailed budget, the applicant's procurement policy. So whether it's a state, local, county government, or a nonprofit organization, the procurement policy, a description of the match, which is where the non-federal funds that are where they will come from. So again, this grant pays up to 65% of the costs with federal dollars, and the remaining 35% must come from a non-federal source. So where is that non-federal money going to come from? And then a commitment letter that says the applicant is committed to providing that 35% match. The FEMA approval of the local hazard mitigation plan, which again I said no one has, or a copy of the extension request to FEMA, which will need to be coordinated with the county. A copy of the dam's floodplain management plan, which, like I said, no one has that either. So the applicant must certify that one will be developed within 12 months of an award. A completed environmental and historic preservation checklist. And then there's a long list of assurances and certifications that must be made. So that has to be that signed statement of assurance and certifications must also be provided. And then lastly, the application must be created with the assistance of a licensed professional engineer registered in South Carolina. And our estimated timeline looks like this. FEMA has said they anticipate making the grant awards to the states by mid-September. So that means DHEC would receive an award from FEMA about mid-September, and then within about a week, DHEC would turn around and issue our notice of funding opportunity and begin accepting grant applications from dam owners. Looking at about not quite 2 months to submit applications. So application deadline of November 12th. approximately. Again, all this is dependent on that first date when we receive an award from FEMA. So we're looking at around mid-November for an application deadline, and then we will begin screening those applications after the deadline to see, what dams are eligible, what applicants are eligible, what proposed activities are eligible, and from those that we determine, past that initial screening, create a list of finalists, and then we will have our first meeting of a review panel that will be responsible for reviewing that list of those final applications, and then ranking those applications. So between November 20th and 30th, again, approximately, our review panelists rank the applications individually. So we have 5 panelists that will be individually ranking applications, and then around December 1st, a second meeting of the review panel where the rankings are reviewed, as well as the available funds to fund all the proposed projects, and then a vote to decide where the cutoff will be, essentially what applications will be funded. DHEC has we have 90 days from that first grant award to DHEC to then turn around and submit back to FEMA our amended grant application with proposed sub awards. So all that has to happen within 90 days from that first FEMA grant award, and then once we submit our amended grant application to FEMA, FEMA has to give us an approval to say, yes, we approve of your proposal to make these sub awards, and then from that date when we receive FEMA approval, we have another 90 days to execute those sub awards, to make those grants. A little more on the application review and selection process. So we have something called a screening level risk analysis that we've performed on all the high hazard dams that will constitute 50% of the project score. And then the review panel will individually rank all the applications, and then those rankings will constitute another 50% of the project score. Any ties will be broken by a vote of the review panel, and applications for any dam removal projects will take priority. And it is for the reason that no other project can achieve as much risk reduction as a dam removal project. So any dam removals that are proposed will take priority. And then lastly, the list of the awards will be based on the available funds. So the review panel will decide on the cutoff. So if we have the money to fund the top 3 projects, then that's what we'll probably, that's likely what we would do. Is just a lot, or maybe there's only enough for 1 project. So it's a lot of uncertainty right now with not knowing how much our award will be, how many applications will make it on the finalist list. So, but that is our plan and how we plan on reviewing and selecting projects. Briefly, the SLRA, the screening level risk analysis I mentioned earlier that will count 50% of a project score, was a system we developed to assign a risk score to every high hazard dam. Each dam gets a score from 0 to 500, and the higher the score, the greater risk posed by the dam. And just kind of as a basic understanding of risk is composed or a function of 3 things: the hazards that may act on the dam. By hazards, we mean earthquakes or floods or anything that threatens the integrity of the dam. Then the risk is also a function of the dam's ability to withstand those hazards. And then lastly, risk is a function of the consequences of the dam's failure. So, without each one of those has a major impact on how much risk is posed by a dam. You can imagine, by removing the consequences alone, if there are no consequences from dam failure, you can essentially eliminate the risk purely by reducing the consequences. Alternatively, if you can eliminate any hazards that may act on the dam, you can eliminate the risk. Or if you can build a dam that has the ability to withstand any hazard, you can eliminate the risk. So it's a combination of three factors. And so how we design this SLRA is the factors that influence the score are the dam's design, kind of its overall design, its configuration, how it's built, the dam's age, and the dam's current condition. So those are the risk factors. Then any defensive design features that may exist, which are risk reduction factors, such as a dam being armored against erosion from overtopping, actually reduces the risk. And then lastly, the population at risk in the event of dam failure, that's the consequence risk factor. So our SLRA process takes all those factors into account to come up with that score that will be, a major 50%, contribute 50% of the rankings for our grant. And then last slide before questions, just the review panel that I mentioned earlier will be composed of myself, Jill Stewart, who is the Director of Dam Safety and Stormwater Permitting here at DHEC, Denise Bunte Bisnet, who is a professional engineer with Santee Cooper and a former president of the United States Society on Dams, Stephen Whiteside, a professional engineer and senior vice president with CDM Smith, the engineering firm that DHEC has currently under contract. And then lastly, a representative from the South Carolina Emergency Management Division. And then I believe that's all I have. I know that was a lot. I appreciate everyone bearing with me. But now I think we will move into the question and answer stage. And again, if we don't answer your question today, I will do my best to follow up with everyone who has a question and make sure that question is answered. And then a summary of all the questions will be provided to all the attendees after the event, in addition to the link to be able to watch or review the recording of this presentation. So let me provide my contact info, and with that, let me start looking at some questions here. I see a question. First question I see here is who determines what dams are eligible? Well, the eligibility will be DHEC. Essentially, I know actually, so the initial screening of applications for eligibility will be done by DHEC. And then once we decide which applications are eligible that meet all the eligibility requirements, and then compile our proposed list of awards, that is still subject to FEMA approval. So FEMA has the ultimate decision on what is eligible, what awards can be made. So I guess it's a multi-level screening. DHEC makes the initial eligibility determination, but FEMA has the final say. Another question was what were the 9 dams that we proposed or that we provided to FEMA as being eligible. I don't want anyone to get caught up on that. Those initial 9 are purely for that funding formula to determine the amount of funds. But after the fact, I mean, I can certainly reach out to those 9 dam owners privately and let them know that they are eligible, already, that we've decided they appear to be eligible. But again, that's not a final decision, that only those 9 are eligible. Another question says, last year's funds were also only for planning. I already have a dam maintenance plan, but I don't have the funds for all the necessary repairs. Do you have ideas for funding for a private citizen with repairs, maintenance needs that need funding? Well, I mean, I do expect that this grant will allow construction at some point. The reason it doesn't allow construction this year is purely a FEMA decision. I don't think that I don't expect that to last much longer. I wouldn't be surprised if next year's grant does allow construction, but I believe FEMA basically, what I heard is they were just not ready and set up and equipped to start funding construction projects yet. So I think it's more of FEMA needs to build their capacity, their staffing, because managing and the once you reach a construction phase, it is a lot more to manage, to oversee, to ensure that federal laws and requirements are being met. So I think that's not going to last much. I mean, I think that prohibition on construction won't last much longer. But again, maintenance will never be eligible. So repairs, yes, repairs will be eligible, but maintenance, it's just not. That's the responsibility of a dam owner. And I don't know of any funding sources to help with maintenance. Someone is saying, this has been very informational and is making me realize this is for dams that are much larger or more at risk and need very extensive plans. We just need to do some tree removal for our tree management plan. So if you have ideas to share during the Q&A, it's appreciated. Yes, I mean that is a pretty accurate statement. That it's not really for dam. This grant program is not really for dams with trees, and trees are if trees have been allowed to grow and become established and get large, that is FEMA views that as a lack of maintenance. So removal of trees is not going to be ever going to be eligible for funding, unless FEMA changes their position. But I don't really have. Again, I do know. I mean, I understand that funding sources are very limited. That's why DHEC has been pursuing this grant program, and we intend to pursue every federal dollar that is out there to be able to pass on to dam owners. But it's right now there aren't a lot of options. Hopefully with the push on more infrastructure funding, at the federal level, maybe those additional infrastructure dollars will flow down to the states and flow down to programs such as this, or other types of programs that can help dam owners. But essentially, I think we're lucky to have even this little program is we've pursued it. We pursue every dollar we can. So there aren't it's just kind of the reality is that there aren't a lot of options out there to fund these kind of infrastructure improvements. Let's see. Someone's asking about the classification. Will dams be reclassified based on the matrix of the new criteria that were added this year? If a dam is high risk, Is it possible you will be downgraded under the new matrix? No, that is purely for grant eligibility determination. It has no impact on our hazard classification of a dam. So, that they're completely separate things. The matrix that I showed is purely a grant tool or a grant a mechanism developed by FEMA to further define what an eligible dam is. So it's purely a grant tool, has nothing to do with with the state's regulations and how the state makes that determination of what is a high hazard dam. Question of, well, I think I already mentioned that we will be we will be posting this video to the DHEC dam safety website. So if you have never visited it before, we are at www.scdhec.gov/dams. So if you want to, we'll try to do our best to get this posted as soon as possible, but that's where you would find this video, this recording. Hopefully within a week, we can get it posted. So I'll repeat that: www.scdhec.gov/dams, and that's where you'll find this video plus a downloadable, version of the question and answer. Someone has a classified high hazard dam that's being required by DHEC to do repair rehabilitation work, which includes cutting down large pine trees and backfilling the stumps/holes. Would this be something that is considered as eligible for the grant? Like I said, FEMA does not consider tree removal as something that is eligible because that, as FEMA has decided, that represents a lack of maintenance. Someone's asking if you can get your dam's SLRA risk scores. Yes, I don't see a problem with that. However, it really is more, it really is more of a, that score, it's, that score on its own really doesn't mean anything. It's not like that number, means anything. It's when we score all the dams as a bunch, and then that ranking, that relative, or that scale, how the rankings fall out is what we really use. It's a relative number, not an absolute, indicator of anything. We use it for the relative. It's to help us prioritize and to look at a dam, in relation to all the other high hazard dams. Is there any state-sponsored help for high hazard dams that are essentially less than 25 feet and less than 50 acre feet? The only thing I can really say, there is there's a small tax credit, and if you search the DHEC website for dams tax credit, that will you can find information about that. But that's the only thing I'm aware of right now, for dams that would not qualify for this grant. Someone's asking for a list of contractors that are doing tree removal related repairs on dams. He has apparently reached out to many contractors that are capable, but hasn't received a return contact from any, and assumed that they are disinterested. I'm sorry that we don't maintain a list of contractors, so I don't have that information. I think the engineers, the list of engineers that we do provide, those engineers are probably the best place to ask about, contractors. But DHEC, I don't have a list of contractors, and I don't really, I really don't have anything to provide there. I do understand that contractors are extremely busy right now. So, I don't know if that means they're disinterested in doing work on dams, or if it's just, just there's so much, so much work in general right now. If you want to if you're still interested in your dam's SLRA score, just contact me directly, and I'll provide that. Someone asked if a dam qualifies as high hazard and has issues that are due to maintenance, but they want to remove the dam, would that qualify? And I think yes. I think, regardless of, maintenance, lack of maintenance or whatever, I think any proposal to remove a dam, a high hazard dam, would get high priority. So yes, I don't think the maintenance problem comes into play if you're talking about removal of a dam. All right, well, that I think that's all the questions I've received so far. Unless anyone else has a question, again, we'll try to get the video recording and summary of all the question and answers posted to the web here within a week or so. And I appreciate everyone's time and patience and joining us today. We at DHEC are trying to pursue every dollar we can, that we can help help the dam owners with. So let's hope maybe that we see additional, maybe some additional funds from Congress flowing down to the states and to grant programs like this. I got one more question. What are the estimated costs of an engineering report for a dam? I can't really, it's hard to say. It's so many factors influence that. The size of the dam, what may already, there may be, a dam, your dam may already have, valid data, valid reports or valid investigations that have been done in the past that stay valid. A geotechnical work done 30 years ago is still valid. So a lot of it depends on how much is already known about your dam versus how much is unknown. So I can't. It's hard to say what an engineering report would cost, but just again, virtually anything you do, once we determine, say, your dam is eligible, any of these any of the planning, investigations, studies, all that is eligible. And again, it is a reimbursement up to 65% of those costs. So I think that's about it. I think with that, I am going to, I think we'll go ahead and call it a completed webinar, and hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions, or if we can help you in any way, feel free to reach out to us. But I think with that, we're going to end, and thank you for joining us. All right, that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.